I think one of the worst things that any government can do is, in a national crisis, order the public of whatever country it may be to do one thing, and then secretly themselves, the very people issuing the orders, do another. And this lockdown party scandal that's rocked Downing Street, I think, has resonated throughout the country because every one of us made huge sacrifices. Some people couldn't see their dying relatives, while Boris Johnson and his staff were gallivanting, apparently on a weekly basis, breaking the very laws inside Downing Street where they made them that they were ordering the rest of us to do. Absolutely disgraceful. To understand just how brilliant the NHS is, go somewhere else in the world and have an accident and see what happens to you. You know, I fell off a Segway, very embarrassingly, in Santa Monica. And all I can remember is I lay literally drifting in and out of consciousness, having broken 5 ribs and collapsed my lung, was somebody waving a bit of paper over me to see if I was insured and to tell me how much this was about to cost me. Whereas if an American had done that in London, they would just get treated. That's the difference between here and, say, the United States, which has, by comparison, a terrible health system that punishes those with very little money and is all based around pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars. We are incredibly fortunate to have this system. It's not perfect, it's flawed in many ways, but my God, if you have an emergency, you want to be having it in this country with our doctors, our nurses, our surgeons, our consultants. Best in the world. Mikel Arteta, well, he talks a good game, but as Muhammad Ali once said, if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk. And right now, it is distinctly unimpressive in terms of the walk. So Arteta, I think, needs to step up and start winning things or step out. I like Taylor Swift. When Damon Albarn from Blur gave her a whack recently saying she didn't write her own songs and she blew up at him and took him down on Twitter, I cheered her on. I think she's gutsy. Great singer, great songwriter, great talent. I like her. The UK Supreme Court will rule tomorrow on whether Scotland can hold a new independence referendum without the UK government's consent. Legendary actor Brian Cox is back in the hot seat here and has been one of the fiercest and most famous advocates for breaking up the union. Brian, good evening. How are you?
I'm good.
Let me before we get into.
Actually, ironically, I don't want to break up the union, but I've got another idea for the union.
Go on.
United Federation.
What? Explain.
Independent countries working in Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and England, because I think England gets a lot of the tap end of the bath. I'm by nature an Anglophile. That's where I studied here in London, so I'm very disposed to that. What I just believe in is the independent states, but we come together as a united federation.
Is that not what the UK is supposed to be?
But it's not, because too many decisions are made on behalf of, like this major decision that's been made in Wales about this Chinese thing, you know, whether it's supposed to be contentious. There's a dangerous element, they say, but the Welsh are getting no say in the matter, which I think is really wrong. So I'm all for, I don't want to break up the union because it's, you know, we are the British Isles. But I want my country, not just my country, I want Wales, Scotland and England to be independent.
I mean, what's interesting, we had a lot of debate, obviously, about whether to leave the European Union. And a recent survey this week in YouGov says now only 32% of Britons now think it was the right thing to do to leave. 56% think it was wrong. That's a massive shift.
Absolutely. But that was so corrupt. I mean, so rotten, the whole thing. And we, Scotland, voted 62% to stay.
Yes, I know. But does that not give you pause for thought about leaving a collective entity, which brings with it at least, you know, strength in numbers, is the argument?
But the north of England, who have been systematically ignored time and time again, are getting, you know, they're well cheesed off about the fact that they don't have enough say in their life, you know. And you think of the great things that Andy Burnham's doing in Manchester, for example. And I'm all for the England expressing themselves in the same way that Scotland does, and that we come together in a proper federation where we contribute. We don't do that now because the rules are all set down here.
And the problem, I think, if I was Scottish right now, given the utter fiasco of the way this government has behaved in the last 6 months alone, from Boris Johnson.
We both agree upon that one.
We went on Question Time
Well,
and
we did.
equally raged, but
Equally
it has
raged.
been completely shameful that we've had these 3 prime ministers now. Boris Johnson, total shambles with all the nonsense he got up to. Liz Truss, unbelievably, for that short 44 days, even worse, tanking the economy, tanking the pound, tanking everything, and now we're picking up the pieces. And now Rishi Sunak has to try and repair all the damage. But if I'm Scottish looking at all this, I'm thinking, look at these London politicians behaving like reckless casino owners with our money, and we have no real say over what these people are doing.
That's my point. You've just made my point.
Well, I agree, but I see that's where I have sympathy.
No, and that's the whole point. But the problem is that systematically, again and again and again, we'll have those guys and those gals making those decisions. I don't know what's going to happen in the next election. I suppose that probably Labour will get in, but we need vision. We need real vision, and those creatures were just
Who do you see out there that you think is actually an impressive politician who might have a vision?
Well, I believe in Nicola Sturgeon.
Do you?
I do. Yes, I do. I think, and they've had a lot of problems up there.
You're right.
Don't get me wrong. They've had a lot of problems, but I do trust Nicola. I think she's the genuine article.
I mean, I've got to say, in her credit, she's always faced the music. I've done many interviews with her, often quite hostile. She always comes back. She doesn't duck interviews like Boris did for so many years. Yeah. She's divisive, but she certainly has what I would call leadership skills.
Exactly. And she's a great leader, and I think she will lead us. But as I say, Piers, and I really mean this, and people say, oh, you go on about independent Scotland. I'm interested in the countries in this country, in this kingdom, so-called United Kingdom, being separate, being individual.
So completely autonomous, but they also are part of a federation.
Exactly. That's exactly what I feel.
But in the federation, I mean, who would have any power in that? Would it be equal power?
No, it would be equal power, and there would be...
What would the federation decide that the independent, autonomous countries couldn't decide for themselves?
Well, most of the stuff domestically they could decide for themselves, but when it comes to the interchange with each country, then they would have to come to some kind of agreement. It won't be easy, but it never is.
What do you do, for example, about currency? Because it would take you years to go back into the EU, which is still, I think, what more Scots would prefer to do. But it would take years to facilitate.
Well,
the Bank of England have said if you leave the UK, you can't have the pound. So what do you do? It's practical level. What do you do?
Well, it's a thing that one has to encompass. You're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. But then again, we didn't go euro. We kept the pound during this whole situation. So we never made that. We never made that transition. I don't know what would happen in terms of. But then, if we had a united federation, we would come to some decision on that very subject. That's what we.
And what about the border? Because we have this nightmare from Brexit of Northern Ireland and what to do with it. There's this belief that if Scotland really wants independence, you've got to sort of rebuild Hadrian's Wall. Are you going to be standing there with your marauding armour, fending off the invading English?
No, that's...
The new William Wallace. You got a bit of Wallace about you.
Yeah, I know. I actually played William Wallace on television 100 years ago.
Perfect cast.
But no, I think that...
But what do you do? Practical level, what do you do about a border if you are a genuine independent country?
Well, how do you deal with a border between Belgium and France? How do you deal with a Belgium between France and Spain?
Would you have a physical border?
You would just have the border. It would be there. It would be at Hadrian's Wall, which is a natural border.
Do you think, when you go up to Scotland, what's the mood about, would you say? Because the polls at the moment do not see a majority in any of the polls for wanting to have an independent Scotland or indeed another referendum. So why do you believe you're nearer to it now than you were?
Well, I just think because, certainly in Scotland's, it changes daily, because there's always... And the Scots are notoriously contentious. They can be very contentious, the Scots. I know because I am one. I was watching Peter Capaldi the other night, and he said, the great gift of my family was family and sarcasm. And I think that's very true. Sorry, what was your question again?
No, my question is, the mood, what is it about the mood in Scotland, do you think, which makes you think the polls are wrong?
Well, like
people do want to have a genuine independent country.
Because we've seen what's happened recently, which has been pretty horrific, with Johnson, Truss very briefly. Did somebody else come in? Well, it's now Richie Sunak, you know. So, and that party has just gone from worse to worse to worse to worse to worse. So we don't want any truck with that. We're like Blanche Dubois. We're always depending on the kindness of strangers. And in a way, we just need to be able to form. And also, it's to do with culturally who we are. You know, we're culturally different. We're not the same. And, you know, when I grew up in Scotland, it was North Britain. And the great thing about Scotland, and the SNP party was regarded as a joke. But they have moved towards, you see, why I became part of, Scottish, I don't like the word nationalist. I've never liked the word national, but I believe in Scottish independence. Nationalist is too contentious a word for me. But when Blair made the whole fiasco, which we're still suffering from in the Middle East, and he got into bed with, Cheney and Rumsfeld and the puppet, as he was really, Bush, and Halliburton and oil, I just thought, it's so obvious that this is a corrupt thing that's happening, and we should not be part of it. Now, in Scotland, we would say, no, we're not going to do that. But, of course, we have no power. We had no power to make any opinion. And I was a Labour man for a long time, and I'm still a socialist in principle. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's why I think we have to come back to ourselves.
It was interesting. I mean, you brought up Iraq. I was editor of the Daily Mirror. We opposed the Iraq war. We lost the campaign, sadly. But when you look at this furore in Qatar, what do you make of it? Because my argument is that I'm not sure we are morally pure enough here to really be talking to the Qataris about how their laws are or anything else.
Well, I think to a certain extent you're right. But I also think that I think what's happening, you know, let's look at Iran and let's look at what's happening in Iran, where there's a sort of possible female revolution, and it's being led by women. See, I do think the patriarchy is over, and I think we need to give these women the rights that they deserve, and we haven't done it. And I think that goes for most of the Middle Eastern nations, but that's also to do with religion. We don't go into that, but certainly these women need to be freed up in a way that they're not being freed up.
How would Logan Roy react to the patriarchy being over?
He would do something else, because he's but I also think, going back to the question of Qatar, that should have been dealt with a long time ago. I mean, Sepp Blatter has already admitted it was a corrupt thing. So we know it was corrupt, but they should have dealt with it a long time ago, not now. This is not the point.
But see, when I had that debate before, I spoke to you with Arsaka. I mean, when you actually do try and work out where is morally pure enough to have a World Cup.
Iceland.
Right. I mean, you're pretty much in Iceland every year, right?
Yeah.
And even there, if we dug deep enough with all the world's journalists, you'd probably find all sorts of problems there. Well, my point being that it's tricky, right? You can't just obviously have it in Iceland every year.
You could. Well, it's not every year, it's every 4 years.
But why shouldn't the Middle East have a World Cup?
Well, no, I think they should have a World Cup, but there's a lot of stuff that's gone on. I mean, the Saudis beat Argentina yesterday.
Incredible.
But then think of what the Saudis did to that journalist in Turkey.
Of course.
Exactly. So
But is that any more morally repugnant than us illegally invading Iraq?
Well, we haven't done that kind of thing. We haven't actually.
Well, we illegally invaded a sovereign country and 1 million people died.
That's what we did. We did it.
I mean, I'm not sure there's a moral difference, to be honest.
Yeah, but just because there wasn't a moral difference doesn't mean to say you have to not abandon that issue and just saying perhaps there needs to be a bit of morality in dealing with things.
Let's take a short break. I want to come back. You're a Manchester United fan.
I am.
And you saw the Ronaldo interview?
I did. Great interview.
I'm going to get your reaction to Ronaldo after the break. Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Brian Cox is still with me. Brian, you're a Man United fan, the biggest star arguably United's ever had. Cristiano Ronaldo went public in this big interview with me. Let's just have a reminder of some of the things he said. They're trying to force you out, you guess.
Not only the coach, but the other 2 or 3 guys there around the club.
At the senior executive level?
Yes, that I felt betrayed. I don't know what's going on, but since the Sir Alex Ferguson left, I saw not evolution in the club. The progress was zero. The Glazers, they don't care about the club. The empathy with the coach is not good. I'm honest.
You don't have a good relationship with him?
I'm not mean good relationship.
Do you think he respects you?
I think he don't respect the way I should deserve.
Well, you must have been worried sick. I mean,
I was very worried.
You lost your baby son, and now your baby daughter's in hospital.
Exactly. Kind of that didn't believe that something going wrong which is make me feel bad.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't believe you.
They believe it, but in the same way, their Piers ever gonna change the health of my family for the football. Never.
Cristiano Ronaldo, that interview's now been viewed 15 million times on our YouTube channel. 45 million more views of the clips on social media, making it one of the biggest, most watched interviews in history, certainly for sport. What did you make of it, Brian? I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo, United legend, torching really the club. What did you think?
Well, I think I can see where he's coming from. But he also has to understand that it is not Alex Ferguson anymore. It's not that United. And I could see that there was probably a great sentimental movement to go back to the club where he really began, where it all began. And Alex, well, you know, there's nobody like Alex Ferguson.
And Alex persuaded him.
And Alex persuaded him to come back.
Yeah.
Well, thinking, naturally, because Alex loves the club, he's trying to keep the club. But the club has gone through so many changes in the last few years. Now, playing for Juventus and playing for Real Madrid, and their clubs have been in an incredible, they haven't stopped, they're just the top of the league. Manchester United has not been playing well over the last few years, but it's beginning to get its mojo back. And I think it's unfortunate that this has happened. And
is he entitled to speak out, do you think?
Well, of course he's entitled to speak out, but also one has to examine exactly where he's coming from. And I think he's coming from a place where he's saying, you know, I wanted to go back to a beginning. I wanted to go back to that glory days where I was a young boy. And I understand.
He said his heart ruled his head to a degree.
His heart ruled his head to a degree. And in a sense, that's going to be difficult, and a manager who's trying to create a new club, and there's going to be a clash.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite tragic, actually, and it's tragic for him, but it's also tragic for the club.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the club has to be given a break on this. I mean, I do think it's hard. It's clearly hard because his expectation must have been huge. And especially if Alex persuaded him to go back.
Yeah.
That must have been a huge thing. But he's been disappointed. And you can't take away his disappointment because it is not the same club that he was at all those years ago. And
have you ever had a situation in your career when you've been tempted to walk out? Or have you walked out of a show, a play, a TV show, anything like that?
No. I'm clever enough to avoid going into those situations.
Have you seen people do it?
Yeah, I've seen people walk away, and I've understood why they do it, and it's usually complex reasons.
I mean, I did it, actually.
Well, yeah.
But I did it because actually, when I listened to Ronaldo, I sort of thought, it actually comes down to respect. I think it doesn't matter what the job is, if you actually feel disrespected in your workplace.
That's right.
And you feel you're being forced down an alleyway you don't want to go down. I actually think there's a certain merit in just saying, actually, it's not for me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe. I'm glad the interviews had the coverage that it's had in terms of. I mean, amazing. 15 million is quite incredible. But at the same time, I'm going. It's rather sad that that's the view you're going to get because, I think, and certainly with his kids and with his family and. Going back to Manchester is a difficult thing.
I think losing the baby in the tragedy with the twins and one died and one lived, that's got to really get to any human being.
And
also, I think he wanted a bit more of an arm wrap.
Yeah, and he didn't get it.
Yeah.
And that's...
It may just really be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Talking of arm wraps, extraordinary series you've got on Channel 5, How the Other Half Live, both rich but particularly pertinently, I thought, the poor. And you went down for this series... You went to food banks. I want to show a little clip first and ask you about this.
Well, actually...
I come here every Friday so that I can feed my son over the weekend. We're working part-time and we still can't afford anything. Yeah. My electricity has gone up from £44 a month to £170 a month.
That's astronomical.
It really is hard going, it really is. We prioritise our children and go without, and I think that's what all adults and parents are doing just now, really, isn't it?
It's shocking how Dundee's gone pretty much full circle, getting back to the poverty I saw as a kid. It's extremely painful, this stuff. It's painful for anybody. If you've got any sensibility at all, this stuff is painful.
So they weren't, you just corrected me there, they weren't food banks, they're called community larders. Explain the distinction.
Well, the difference is what people feel about food banks is loss of dignity.
Yeah.
And the one thing that human beings have, even when they don't have any money, is some kind of dignity, some kind of feeling of well-being of who they are. And what the community larder does is it charges the minimal, but it means you're paying for something. So there's a transaction.
You're not being given it.
You're not being given it, and it's not begging, because a lot of being in food banks feels like begging. And the fact that they're being constantly legitimized is really irksome to me. But this community larder, run by these two amazing women who actually ran a playgroup, and it was out of a playgroup they decided to go on to this. And people like Lidl, Morrison's, they give stuff which is coming up to its sell-by date that then they can tap on. And the thing that you don't see in the program, which is one of my angers with my editors in that, anyway, that's neither here nor there, but the thing you don't see is a guy who came in at the community larder. He was called Peter Leith. He came in, and he was a frail man with a stick, and he had a sign on his arm. And I said, so you do this for your family? And he said, no, I do it for people who can't get here.
It was 15 people he did it for, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. He said, I do it for them. He said, and I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, that's amazing. He said, I do sort of 5 a week. I do different groups, people who can't, older people who can't get down from the high rises. I said, that's extraordinary. And I said, so what's this sign? He said, I'm blind. And I just almost fell off my chair. I just thought...
But you got quite tearful, actually.
I did, because I just thought, the heroism of this guy, this guy's a real hero. And I just thought, wow, this man has really given something of his life to this horrible situation and trying to make it better for other people.
So many people in this country, in the whole of the UK, are now literally on the poverty line.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to get worse before it gets any better. 11% inflation, this energy crisis, the war in Ukraine, all these things conspiring, the fallout from the pandemic. You saw at the sharp end. I mean, you went back to your hometown and you were horrified by what you found. What do we do about this?
It's a big question. It's a big issue. I think independence would help.
Do you?
I do.
In Scotland's case?
Certainly in Scotland's case, but I also think elsewhere it would help.
I mean, it would only help if the economy was revived.
That's right.
And many economists think that Scottish independence would be bad for the Scottish economy.
No, well, I would argue with that, but I haven't got the time to do that here. But no, I mean, I feel that we're going from bad to worse. But we've again and again and again, we have neglected our own. And it's suddenly at a bad time now when everything is against us, the cost of living crisis, what have you, the war, the pandemic, what the pandemic has done. But even so, their lives haven't changed. The budget didn't help them, those people, and it never does. It never does. It never looks to the poorest. We don't concern ourselves with that. They're an embarrassment. Let's put them over there. But now, and why I wanted to do this program was to bring it to the fore and say, these people matter, and we have to do something about it. We have to have some attitude that we haven't got, that we've kind of elbowed for too long, actually. And that's what I feel.
It's powerful stuff, and I commend people to watch it. How the Other Half Live on Channel 5. Can't let you go without asking you about Succession, one of my favourite shows ever in the history of television. You've got a new series coming in the new year. Can you tell me anything, or do you have to shoot me?
Piers, I don't have a gun. But if I did, you'd have to be shot.
Is Logan Roy in Series 6?
Well, there isn't Series 6. We're only Series 4.
I know. That's a trick question.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, let's see what happens. I mean,
in other words, does he survive this series?
Well,
it's 4 you're doing now, so it's been...
Yeah, he'll survive this series.
Yeah.
No, there'll be no problem about
There's no
that.
death we have to...
No, none of that. No, that's all speculation and nonsense. No, I mean, there's a lot to be dealt with in terms of who's going to take over, and there's a lot to be dealt with in terms of the writers and where they can go with it. See, the great thing about Jesse Armstrong is he doesn't stay too long at the fair.
Right.
Because each season has topped the last season. So we have to keep topping.
But it reminds me of Aaron Sorkin on The West Wing, where the first 4 seasons were fantastic. Then he left and the writing collapsed and the whole thing...
And that's what we don't want to happen.
Yeah. Would you rather end on a high?
I would rather end on a high.
Yeah.
And
leave them wanting more, not less.
Yes, and there's I'm no names, no pack drill, but there's a show called Billions, you know, and Damien Lewis left, and they're still going on with it.
Yeah, I know.
But it's
over-egging the souffle. That's what I would call.
A wee bit.
How many times a day do you get told to tell people to F off?
All the time.
Like a dozen times a day?
I was at the Scottish BAFTAs last night, and I couldn't get away from people. You know? And of course, it's, as I said before, it's the best thing to tell people.
Yes.
Because when you're fed up with them, you go, oh, fuck, you know.
You can say it, we'll bleep you.
Oh, don't bother me anymore, just the off.
And finally, as a Scot, who do you most want to win the World Cup, England or Wales? Or somebody else?
I have to reserve judgment on that.
Oh, come on, Tom, get off the fence.
No, I'm not. I can't do that.
Do you want England to beat, say, the United States?
I think I'd like to see England do well because I think he's done a great job.
Southgate.
Yeah, I think he's really done a great job. And there's some great players. We've got a few good Arsenal players in there.
Yeah,
well,
Saka, on fire.
Saka, what a player.
Tremendous.
I was worried about him because he got... a couple of games ago, they took his legs from him, and I thought, oh, God.
He's made a tough stuff at Arsenal.
Yeah.
Brian, brilliant to see you. Good evening from New York. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Whether we monarchist Brits like to admit it or not, the President of the United States is the single most important person in the world, commanding the world's mightiest military and holding the purse strings of its biggest economy. The President could end Israel's war in Gaza with a phone call or decide if Ukraine gets the backing it needs to beat Putin. At least that's the general idea. But the current Commander-in-Chief is 81, seemingly going on 181 after a lifetime of distinguished public service as a pragmatic politician and, in my view, a thoroughly decent human being. President Biden looks increasingly unfit for service. And with the president in visible decline, his re-election campaign is, well, transitioning. You might say its pronouns are changing before our very eyes. The two most important women in President Biden's life have been sent out to jumpstart the 2024 race. Wildly unpopular VP Kamala Harris said this.
We've got 10 months to go until the election. And increasingly, and you've seen it even just this week, we are all starting to narrow in on what this election will mean. Yeah. And it's going to be the choice between what is about respecting our democracy, what is about competence versus chaos.
Well, the Vice President is right. Competence is crucially important, but her own boss has trouble getting up the stairs and can't seem to find a way off a stage. His frequent verbal and physical stumbles are the subject of both comedy and concern. Most people responded with laughter and derision, for example, when First Lady Jill Biden said this about him.
I see Joe every day. I see him out, traveling around this country. I see his vigor. I see his energy.
To those who say I can't vote for Joe Biden, he's too old. What do you say?
I say his age is an asset.
Energy and vigour. Not quite what I'm seeing. You can make a plausible case for the wise old statesman with a firm hand on the tiller, but campaigning on Biden's vigour may well fast-track Donald Trump, who does have a lot of vigour, to the White House. Now, at 77, Trump's no spring chicken himself, but with his diet-defying swagger and showmanship, most people on his side seem to be believing him when he says things like this.
I feel like I'm about 35 years old. I actually feel better now than I did 30 years ago. Tell me, is that crazy? I feel better now. And I think cognitively I'm better than I was 20 years ago. I don't know why.
That is a slightly more debatable subject, Mr. Trump, but a whopping 77% of Americans, both Republican and Democrats, believe that Biden is simply too old to run the country. Almost 70% think he's mismanaged the crisis at the southern border. Just 13% say they're financially better off on his watch. At this stage of his term, he's the least popular US president in recorded history. And this stuff matters. US politics is almost hysterically polarised to the rest of us outside America, but most voters are in fact ready to be persuaded. White working-class voters ditched the Democrats to propel Trump to office in 2016. Now more and more Hispanic and black voters are shifting Republican too. Biden says he's the only man who's ever beaten Trump, and that's true. But right now, he may be the only one who can lose to Trump in November. Well, I'm joined by my super PAC here in the studio in New York, co-host of The Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God, host of The Rubin Report, Dave Rubin, and the Democrat strategist and Fox News contributor, Jessica Tarlov, who I could hear her lips pursing as I read that
Was
monologue.
that loud?
I could feel them
I
pursing.
appreciate, though, I saw you tempered it a bit. Whoever put it in the prompter was harsher than you were.
I could feel the pursing. I was reining back in real time. Let me start with you, Jessica, because I like Joe Biden personally.
Yeah.
I think he's got a lot of very admirable qualities as a human being, and his own story. You know, the fact he lost his wife and a baby when he was just a senator. He then lost another son. Anyone that can do that and still do the job he's doing will always have my admiration. But there is no doubt he is in real trouble here. Is there any doubt? I mean, can you paint a picture that isn't as grim as the one I painted?
Oh, I definitely can do that. And I've been preparing for 3.5 minutes to get the chance. I'm not going to start by denying that the age factor is massive in all of this. And I think that people's concerns as well about Kamala Harris and her readiness to take over informs that. If there was a hugely popular vice president kind of waiting in the wings, I think things might feel a bit different for people. But 81 is 81. There are some 81-year-olds. We all watch Warren Buffett, right?
Mick Jagger is 80.
Yes.
Nearly 81.
He would have a different kind of agenda for the country. But yes, he does.
Might be quite a popular one.
Yeah, that would be pretty good.
I wouldn't hate it. But there is a problem going on right now with media coverage of the Biden presidency, and there are problems with the Biden campaign.
What are the problems?
So I'll start with media coverage. Everybody knows now that you want to print stories that get clicks, and negative stories are the ones that do it. Even people who are huge supporters of the president focus on all the polls that are negative. Most people wouldn't know that if you went to the Real Clear Politics homepage and clicked on polls, the average has Joe Biden down just 1 percentage point to Trump. You would think that he was getting trounced. You'd look at swing state polls, and you'd see that in a lot of the swing states, like Pennsylvania, for instance, which is going to be a huge deal, he's up massively. We only talked about the fact that he was down in one Michigan poll last week. In terms of the economic news, the Wall Street Journal, our very own Wall Street Journal here at News Corp, had a hugely optimistic set of editorials out there. 62% of Americans think the next year, so 2024 election year, is going to be better for them. When are they going to go and vote? In November. That's a lot of time for this economic recovery to really settle in for people. But no one wants to talk about that. It's not popular. It's not good clickbait. The second part about the campaign, and this is where I think the Obama folks who have been perhaps too publicly critical, I think, of the Biden campaign, their ground game is not visible to folks. They don't feel like they're there in Nevada, in Arizona, in Georgia, in these states that we desperately need to win. And they are working on that. And I think that the president himself needs to be more visible. If I was working in the White House, I would have him out there all the time. I understand you might be risking a stumble.
I wouldn't. I'd do what they did with him last time. I'd keep him in a dungeon. I mean, Dave, look, here's the thing. I think the problem is not, it's not his age. I think that Joe Biden's problem is the clear senility that's going with his age. Like I said, I met Mick Jagger last summer, absolutely bursting with the vim and vigour that Jill wants us to believe she sees him go.
Look, Piers, do any of us sitting at this table or anyone watching this think that he could run one shift at McDonald's? And I don't mean that as a shot for someone that works at McDonald's.
Well, that's what a lot of senior citizens do, though.
But I don't think he could. I think a lot of senior citizens could, because I don't think it's an age thing. I agree with you. It's a cognitive.
Dame Joan Collins at the Emmys stole the show.
Yes.
She's 90 years old. Good friend of mine. She looks about 50, and she has the mental acuity of a 50-year-old. She has vim and vigour. So Jill Biden is right to say it's about vim and vigour, but her husband doesn't exude it.
Well, look, let's put it this way. You opened by saying something about ailing Joe Biden, and I thought, I haven't looked at my phone in 20 minutes. Did something else happen?
It's a general ailing.
It's ailing. Yes, we all know it. The wandering off when they get him off the plane and the confusion. He literally on camera 2 years ago, said, let's go, Brandon. Like, something is not right. We all know it. And I would say respectfully, in terms of the polls and everything, people don't vote on what really matters. We vote on what we can feel, right? And I think because of that, people are going, Donald Trump, he seems back. There's energy there, and there's just no energy with Biden.
Trump,
and nobody likes Kamala.
But Trump has lost every election except 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a loser.
And, right to the point, the Democrats decided to finish him off with 91 criminal charges and thought this will do him. He's down, he's wounded, and we'll get him. And it's had the complete opposite effect. He has used that to play the martyr, the victim. It has fueled a resurgent Trump. And you cannot deny, I mean, I've seen people try to downplay what happened at Iowa. But if that had been Joe Biden who'd done that at Iowa, you'd be saying, this is unbelievable. It's a landslide. It's amazing. He's killing them, right? Trump is back. And I think will definitely be the nominee, regardless, unless there's some extraordinary twist of events. He's exuding the air of someone on a mission. He's got vim and vigour. And whether you love him or hate him, and it's equal doses with Trump, you've got to say, Trump v. Biden in November, I could see Trump winning that.
Is there anything about Iowa that makes you say maybe Republicans should pivot and go to somebody like a Nikki Haley, maybe? Like when you see that she picks up, a lot of Democrats, a lot of independents, do you think that they're doing themselves a disservice by maybe not getting behind her?
Possibly.
Because you know the GOP is going to fall in line, and she's somebody who seems like they can pick up votes from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, but you yourself made news by talking about the vim and vigour claimed by Jill Biden, didn't you? I mean, you're not...
I don't see the vim and...
You're not...
vim and vigour or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I had a great time on your Breakfast Club show yesterday, and it was really enlightening conversation we had. But, it's not that like you said, are you telling people to vote Trump? No. It's not for me to tell people how to vote in this country. And I've been very critical of Trump in the last, since certainly overall the stolen election nonsense, the January 6th thing. I wasn't buying into any of that. And in a way, I felt that was disqualifying. But we are where we are. It didn't disqualify him. He could actually go to prison and still be president of the United States constitutionally. So we're into completely uncharted territory. All I do feel is the more the Democrats have tried to kill him off, particularly with all these criminal charges, the more that even Republicans that don't like him have gone, you know what, it is a witch hunt. The Liberals are trying to nail this guy. He's one of us. We're going to back him. And so it's been self-defeating. A bit like the Russian collusion thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the interesting thing is if you're going to use language like, this is going to be the end of democracy as we know it, then there needs to be a sense of urgency. Like you said, when is the ground game going to start? Why is the ground game just starting now if it's going to be, the end of democracy? And I think that's what scares people, too. If we see the clear and, to me anyway, the clear and present danger that could be a second Trump presidency, is the Biden-Harris ticket a winnable ticket? I'm a person who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, so I don't think it's anything wrong with asking that question.
Do you think it's a winnable ticket?
I don't know. When I look at the polls, I don't think so. I think that a 60-plus-year-old...
No incumbent president with this poll rating that Biden's currently at in the low 30s has ever been re-elected.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at it, I don't think so. You never know. You can say it's 50-50, but I think a 60-plus-year-old Joe Biden, with the things he's done as far as the infrastructure bill, even the student loan forgiveness, the way the economy is now, I think a 60-something-year-old Joe Biden. He also said to you on your show, which again made headlines. You make a lot of headlines, Charlotte. I'm jealous. But he said, if you're black and you don't vote for me, you're not black. He meant it as a joke. But what did you think when he said that? Was that a sense of entitlement, a bit of arrogance about the African-American vote? I think that, he has too many black friends around him, and they made him feel comfortable enough to make that joke. I feel like he probably had a bunch of black people around him who have said that exact language, because when they say that, they're saying that, hey, if you vote for Trump, you're literally voting, against your own interests as a black person. And I think he's heard that a bunch of times, so he thought that would have been a nice little...
Dave, let me ask you a specific thing, Dave, about this, right? So Trump, this is where I have a problem with Trump. Every time I sort of, he makes me laugh, right? He just does. When he said that thing on the eve of Iowa, that even if it kills you, come out and vote it, you've got to laugh. Right? And actually watching
people
leader of the free world.
But watching po-faced liberals lose their minds when he does that stuff makes me chuckle, right? I see myself as pretty down the middle, but I think he's funny and he can make people laugh. But when he says this, I don't laugh, right? He said the President of the United States on Truth Social yesterday, the President of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for him to properly function. Any mistake, even if well-intended, would be met with almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end. For even events that cross the line must fall under total immunity. So I tweeted, so if President Biden orders the immediate assassination of you, Donald Trump, That's okay, is it? That's covered.
What you're explaining is the true magic of Donald Trump, whether you love his policies or not. Because on one hand, you're going, well, there are certain lines when he pokes fun at the.
Yeah, but he means this.
No. So your line now is he put it in quotes, crosses the line.
No, I can tell. I can tell when he's laughing and joking.
So you think when he says cross the line, what he meant was I can take out Joe Biden.
No,
president.
no, that was me suggesting that that's where you take the argument.
But what do you think he means?
I think what he means
would kill one of his political opponents or get them killed if he could.
No, I think he's actually, as always with Trump, it's self-interest. He wants to basically make sure he can't be prosecuted.
He means Jack Smith, go home.
Yeah.
That's what he means.
Yeah,
and if the corollary is my political opponent could kill someone, he then wants to talk about 2016 when we all ran around and said, you know, he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and his supporters wouldn't care.
By this new criteria, he could do that and get away with it.
Right. Well, I think there are some legal questions as per what a president is allowed to get away with and not be prosecuted after. But I'm pretty sure murder is not one of them, like outright murder.
We don't know that.
He would like it to be. He would like anything that crosses the line to fall under total immunity.
The man has open adulation for Xi Jinping,
That's right.
for Kim Jong-un.
That's right.
He's a wannabe dictator, and I don't, I've been at Fox News my entire media career. I do not fancy myself an MSNBC type person who wants to lose their mind about those things. But that is very serious to have someone who was the leader of the free world and is running to be it again, to believe that these people who are anathema to democracy are doing it right.
What did you feel when Kamala...
And also, too, though, we're acting like, it's not just rhetoric. Yes, he said he wanted to be a dictator for a day. Yes, he said, he should be immune from killing his political rivals. But he also attempted a coup in his country, guys.
Right.
Like, why are we acting like that did not happen? Why do we keep acting like January 6th did not happen?
I mean, it didn't happen. I mean, what, that a bunch of people showed up with no plans, no weapons? I mean, I'm not defending the people that actually broke windows or anything else, but there was no coup. There was no
That was an attempted coup in this country. I got eyes and ears. I'm not a political expert,
but I know what I saw. Was there a plan? Did anyone have a piece of paper that said
Proud Boys had a plan, and they were invited into the White House.
Right.
There were people with zip ties. That's not a casual thing that you walk around with.
I'm not diminishing.
They went after the ballot box. They were talking about hanging the vice president.
There were 1,000. There were only 100 bad ones, let's say. That doesn't mean that it wasn't an attempted coup fomented by the President of the United States of America.
I mean, does anyone honestly think that Donald Trump thought that the next day he would be president, post transition?
Well, Bill Barr
transition?
does, which is why he finally had to go. There are people, what was so powerful about the January 6th committee and what they were able to put together is the fact that they used almost exclusively Republican testimony. People who had worked for him. Look at the text messages from his own son to Mark Meadows, or what Ivanka had to be honest about when she testified, or Jared Kushner, or Cassidy Hutchinson, who they're going after now. He made a mockery of our system. And frankly, it speaks to the strength of our institutions and the backbone of Mike Pence for that 8 hours that he was able to say.
I thought it was I got to say, it was a pretty terrifying spectacle.
I'm sure watching it abroad, you thought, what the hell is going on
I
here?
remember emailing one of his team and saying, you've got to get him out there and call this thing off. And he didn't for a long period of time while this mayhem was erupting. You can dress it any way you like. You can spin it any way you like.
It was an attempted coup.
Thousands of people whipped up into a mindset of, we have to stop this democratic action happening, stormed into the epicenter of American politics, and they tried to take control and, in their eyes, stop democracy happening. Now, the liberal response, by the way, which is to classic liberal response, which is completely half-assed, which is to say, right, let's take him off the ballot now in loads of different states, is obviously stupid.
Right,
because
that is the rocket fuel.
You don't try and stop a guy you think has tried to thwart democracy by thwarting democracy.
Can I say two things? One, Charlemagne brought up a point that I wanted to add on to that's really important about the vim and vigor. Right, so Donald Trump, I don't think that he's going to trip and fall and die tomorrow. But when people do see him, he's talking absolute rubbish.
He's done that for 50 years. Come on.
But people, I agree. And I didn't even like his shows when it was on regular TV. But my point
even
is,
when I appeared? Come on, the 2008 Celebrity Apprentice was the stuff of a masterpiece.
But the kind of communication that he's putting out there, even in the last 48 hours, we went from Iowa, I was there, I was on air, and I said this is a big accomplishment for him. He's being conciliatory. How long will it last? Then we got to immigrants are poisoning the blood of America. Then defaming a woman who he's been charged. They found him guilty of sexually assaulting her. He continues with that. He's talking about how magnets work in water, using ID to buy a loaf of bread. It's not like people who are at home are saying, this guy's got it together and this guy doesn't.
No, but you know what
I'm not even defending any of
You know what? We're going to come back. I'm going to talk after the break to Dean Phillips and keep you guys here to react to that. But I also want to talk about what Jamie Dimon said, which I thought was really interesting, when he said that if you call everyone who's a MAGA a supporter of Trump, if you call them a bunch of crazies, then you are completely missing the point why most of them actually want to vote for Trump, which is economy, foreign policy, the border, all these things which he was strong on last time. He said that's why they want him back, because they feel they've been let down on that by Biden. We'll talk about that after the break. Stay with me. Uncensored next. More from my New York super PAC. I'll be talking about the Democratic presidential candidate who wants Joe Biden to stand aside. He's Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips, and he'll be here live in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Piers Uncensored, live from New York City. Democrats are privately fretting about President Biden's disastrous polling in the race for the White House. Very few of them are prepared to say it out loud. Only one elected Democrat has been bold enough to run against the incumbent president. And US Representative Dean Phillips is that man and joins me now. Well, Mr. Phillips, thank you for joining me. I guess the first question for the global audience is, who are you and why do you want to be president?
Who am I and why do I want to be president? Well, I'll tell you my quick story. I lost my father in the Vietnam War. He was a soldier who served his country and gave his life to our country. I got very lucky. 3 years later, my mom remarried. I was adopted into a remarkable family. One of many blessings, including business, philanthropy. My grandmother was the advice columnist Dear Abby, entered our family business, built Belvedere Vodka, then sold that, built Talenti Gelato, the ice cream brand. And Piers, I woke up the morning after the 2016 election. I found my youngest daughter in her bedroom in tears, and I recognized life has changed in America and around the world. I promised them, my two daughters, I would do something. I ran for Congress. I flipped a district that had not elected a Democrat since 1958. And I beat an incumbent who had won by 14 points. I beat him by 12. And I got to the U.S. Congress in 2019 and found an unmitigated, dysfunctional disaster that is easily fixed with good leadership, Piers. And you ask why I'm running for president? Well, the overwhelming, exhausted majority of Americans, center-right, center-left Americans, common sense people, are tired of this. They want to turn the page from both Trump and Biden. And I tell you, I tried to get the president to pass the torch. I called other candidates who are better known than me. None of them would do it. So I thought it was time for courage. My father gave his life to this country. And I entered the race because if not now, when? And if not me, who? And I got to tell you, Piers, it is a joyful journey. And Americans are not as divided as Angertainment would have us believe. And I'm going to make change in a common sense, decent way that engages Democrats and Republicans and moves beyond this dangerous nonsense.
Well, look, everything you say makes perfect sense, except this. Joe Biden, if he doesn't stand down, will be the nominee. Now, twice in post-Second World War history, there has been an incumbent Democrat president who has done that. You know, Lyndon Johnson did it, and there was another president who did it. They stood down and didn't go forward. But if Joe Biden doesn't do that voluntarily, you have no way in.
Well, Piers, I don't buy into that. I'll tell you, I've spent my life, my professional life, disrupting businesses and categories, trying to disrupt the U.S. Congress that is in desperate need of it. And that's why I'm doing this again. As long as American voters actually get out and vote in the primary, anything is possible. Joe Biden's not a bad man. He's a good man, but he's 81 years old. He's facing the lowest approval numbers in American presidential history. Every poll he's losing, including the battleground states. And even, you know, Charlemagne the God, who was just on with you moments ago, and I was on the Breakfast Club just about a week ago, he's speaking the truth, too, saying the quiet part out loud. He's not electable. So Democrats will have a choice, Piers, sometime soon, to either go and coordinate a candidate who is going to lose or go with hope and optimism and a brighter future with a candidate, me, who's 54 years old, and able, willing, competent, and ready to combine the very best of center-right, center-left thinking in America and stop the nonsense and win. That's the choice of American voters, and we got to practice democracy, not just talk about it.
All right, look, you haven't got much time. Give me 3 things you would do if you were president tomorrow. Top priorities.
Oh, let me start with Let me talk about executive leadership. I will have a bipartisan cabinet of the best and brightest Americans, Democrats and Republicans. I will have a youth cabinet. I will employ zero-based budgeting. I will actually manage our federal government in a fiscally responsible manner. I will address the southern border, which is an unmitigated mess and disaster, inhumane, horrible for our economy and our international reputation, and we must reform our asylum policies. And then I will do what is most important for Americans right now. Costs and chaos are out of control. Life is unaffordable. 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, 40% cannot afford a $400 emergency. We've got to attack affordability, and we've got to end the chaos, not just in the United States, but all around the world. End the wars, invest in peace, and bring this country together and do our best to bring this world together before it's too late, Piers. And that's going to take all of us. And by the way, as some have noted, Jamie Dimon, about Biden condemning all Trump supporters, I welcome and invite Trump supporters. I love everybody. As long as you are people of principle and decency and want to work together, Piers, we got to change this nonsense. The two parties are the problem. And I'm running for change, and I don't mind that disruption because I think most people want it.
Well, it's good of you to join me, Mr. Phillips. I would personally say you probably have two hopes of succeeding, no hope and Bob hope, but I do admire the aspiration. And I actually like the cut of your jib as well. So you never know in politics, right?
Hey, you never know. You got to give it a shot. And by the way, mark my words, watch here in New Hampshire on January 23rd, just 4 days from now. You might be surprised.
I look forward to it. I would love to be surprised. Dean Phillips, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Charlemagne, you got...
What an optimist you are, P.
You know what I am? I'm an optimist tinged with being a realist, right? You've got to be real about this. I don't think Joe Biden has shown any indication of wanting to stand down at all. Unless he voluntarily does that, is persuaded to, he is going to be the nominee, right? And for someone like you, you've become, with your show, various shows, but The Breakfast Club in particular has this extraordinary number of young black people who tune in religiously to listen to it, to watch it, and to think, what do they want? What do they want from their president? I mean, they've got two elderly white guys right, running for president. This is not an Obama 2008-9 scenario. What do they want to happen here?
Well, when you talk about it in those terms, number one, they want both of them to step out the way. They want the GOP to move away from Trump. They want, Democrats to move away from Biden. But I don't care who you talk to. Most folks you speak to want upward mobility. Like, it's all about money. Like, that's the conversation that they should be having. When they're having conversations about, creating jobs, when they're having conversations about the economy being better, that's great. But is it trickling down to the least of us? Is it trickling down to the hood? Is it trickling down to the rural areas like where I'm from in Moncks Corner, South Carolina? If those people aren't feeling the relief, then they feel like, what you're doing isn't necessarily.
And what did you feel about Jamie Dimon, who says that, if you just ridicule and mock the MAGA crowd, the really hardcore Trump supporters, it's wrong, that you should respect all Americans, right? They're entitled to their opinion, entitled to vote for who they want to vote for. I mean, I thought he had a point. He also had a point that if you just over-demonize Trump, I think I said on your show, I met Chris Rock after the 2016 election the next day, and he said, if someone's murdered 8 people, don't go around saying he's murdered 9 about Trump. In other words, if you just exaggerate how bad he is, people are going to find out.
See, that was 2016. I think in 2024, we kind of see what a Trump presidency is like and how bad it could potentially be. And
what are you most worried about with him?
I'm worried about, the threat to democracy seriously, because when you hear a guy say, hey, we should get rid of the Constitution in order to overturn the results of election, like when you hear a guy say, you hear his lawyers in court say, well, he never agreed to support the Constitution. It's like, whoa, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, black, white, gay, straight. If you're an American citizen, you cannot have a leader of the free world who does not respect the Constitution.
Dave, you can't have someone who doesn't respect the Constitution.
No, you can't. Well, first off, the beauty of America and our system and the Constitution and the rest of our founding documents is that they work, and we've separated powers enough so that guys like Donald Trump potentially, if he wanted to be dictator, it's not that you just flip a switch and suddenly you're dictator.
So why are they not using the 14th Amendment then?
Well, hold on a second. I would also say that if you look at the actual reality of Trump's presidency pre-COVID, the economy was booming. We had the Abraham Accords, lowest all-time black unemployment, lowest all-time Latino unemployment. And you may remember at the State of the Union when he mentioned that, and AOC and the rest of the Congressional Black Caucus sat there like this. I thought they would have been for low black unemployment. So Trump has done a lot of things right. And I'm saying this as somebody that wasn't even supporting him 3 days ago. I mean, I'm a DeSantis guy. I moved to Florida because
Jamie Dimon, to be fair, look, to be clear, he's not a big Trump supporter.
Yeah, but
he's
reality.
He's locked horns with Trump a few times. He's donated to the Democrats, right? It's not, and Trump has rubbished him in public about doing business in China. So it's not like he's a diehard Trumper himself. He just made the point, which I think is right, which is if you just abuse everyone that votes for him, you are basically committing an act of self-harm.
What I would recommend anyone do as this election keeps going is as the rallies start again, and I did not vote for Trump in 2016. I did vote for him the first time, but the second time. And one of the reasons that I ended up doing it was one day in LA, I happened to drive by a rally and I was like, you know what, let me just go in there and see what's going on. And there were black people and there were Latinos and gays for Trump. And it was a joy fest. It was a party. American flags everywhere. It wasn't some coalesced idea of let's take out democracy or take out the Marxists or anything else. It was basically kind of like an FU to the system and then just this mix of politics. I mean, that's the
All right, Jessica, were you in this party he's talking about?
It was right
I wasn't invited. There were gays, blacks, Latinos, but no liberals.
What did you think? What did you think of Jamie?
There were an awful lot of liberals.
Yeah, there were
actually.
4 Bernie Sanders voters who probably didn't turn up.
What did you think of Jamie Dimon's comments? Because they were interesting.
I think Jamie Dimon runs a huge international business, and you can see a line in the sand with how people who don't want to lose customers talk about all of this, and they have to do it that way. And that's correct. But as someone who spends my time in conservative media with people who vehemently disagree with me, I've had it up to here. If I could clutch my pearls any harder, whatever it is. They try to say that liberals talk the same way about conservatives that conservatives talk about liberals. If Donald Trump wins the presidency again, you will have a president who calls more than half the country, 81 million voted for Joe Biden, 74 million for Trump, calls us thugs, pedophiles, communists, Marxists, anti-Americans, traitors. I'm not being welcomed into any sort of
I have a question. I have a
there.
question for you, which I asked Charlemagne yesterday. How many immigrants did Barack Obama deport in 8 years?
He's the deporter in chief, and I said it.
Do you know how many it is?
3 million.
2 million.
He only knows because I told him. He hadn't got a Scooby yesterday.
I thought it was only 2.
It's over 3 million. It was the greatest number pro rata of any president in history.
Yes, and
he
it
was
did
the
not hurt him with
deporter-in-chief.
Latino voters. I say it all the time on the 5. Biden can get tougher about this. Henry Cuellar, he's got it right how he's talking about it. The border Dems, the Mark Kellys of the world, that's all fine and good. But to your point about what this world looked like or this country before COVID, Trump's setting all these records. Guess what? Biden's done better than his records. So black unemployment is lower than it was under Trump. Latino unemployment lower than under Trump. Let's talk about oil. I can't even tell you how many times I've been told, drill, baby, drill. Well, Joe Biden's doing it. 13.3 million barrels. It's the highest amount of oil produced by any country in history.
Good sales pitch. But here's the critical question for all of you, and it's a one-word answer. If it's Biden-Trump in November,
Who am I voting for?
Who wins?
I do believe Biden wins.
Trump.
Charlemagne, the casting votes.
Well, by the way, that's what's so scary about it. Like,
Right, that you have to think.
And by the way, you don't have to want this to happen.
But you're talking about, I know, but you're talking about a guy who has 91 criminal charges, a guy who says he wants to be a dictator for a day, a guy who says we should rip up the Constitution.
Against a guy who doesn't know what day it is.
And that's what I'm saying. So if Biden has done all of these great things and he's up against that and we're still not sure
I need a name, Charlemagne.
Is he winnable? I really don't know.
You got to give me a name.
Who's going to win?
Biden v. Trump.
It's not Dean Phillips.
It's not going to be Dean Phillips. I really, truly don't know. If I had to say right now, I would say Donald Trump.
Wow. There we go, the casting vote. Charlemagne the God, the man with his finger on the pulse of America. Trump.
Maybe, but I don't know. I really.
It's a long time.
That's what's so scary about it.
There's a long time to go. Brilliant to have you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
indeed.
much.
There's lots of debate about who's the greatest football player of all time. To me, there's only one winner, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's not only the top scorer in the history of football, but I think he's the guy that proves it's not just about talent, it's about work ethic. When I had dinner with him in Italy, over 4 hours, I just got a sense of the kind of guy he is. Unbelievably driven, incredibly focused, doesn't party, looks after himself, works out, trains every day, and just wants every day to get up and be the best in the world. And for many, many years, in my estimation, he has been. And you get your Messi fans, of course you do. There's only one Cristiano Ronaldo. The thing about vegans is they always look so miserable, don't they? They always look like what they really need is a good hot steak. And that's probably what they're all thinking. Because who would voluntarily want to be a vegan? It's so riddled with hypocrisy. The ones who say, well, I'm doing it to save the animals. Really? Because most of you drink almond milk, eat almonds and avocado. How do you think those get made? I'll tell you. By the slaughter of billions of bees in California every year, over a 5-week period. Billions of bees get killed so that vegans can have their almond milk and avocado. And yet they dare to lecture me about animal welfare? No, not having it. Cheer yourselves up and get a nice steak inside you, and we'll just pretend it never happened. I like Joe Biden personally. I think he's a decent man, but very sadly, I think what we're seeing is that he got the big job too late. He's about to turn 80, and his early tenure so far as president has been, frankly, a disaster. He comes across as somebody too old for the job, finds it all too much, I think. Certainly nothing like the firebrand senator he used to be in his younger days. I think that America's got real problems now with their economy, with the way they've handled the pandemic, with the division in the country, and he's doing nothing to solve these problems. And ultimately, America needs someone to come in and fix their big problems, as we do in our country. But I don't think Joe Biden's the guy. And you could see a situation where, if he carries on this badly, that Donald Trump could actually get re-elected. And if that doesn't give people pause for thought, nothing will. I think Facebook gets a bad rap. They've done some pretty ruthless commercial things and they deserve to be held account for it. I think they should treat themselves as a proper publishing platform with all the regulation that comes with that, which newspapers and television companies have. But I do think they've been an extraordinary social media platform that have also done a lot of good, which we never read about anymore. Over 1 billion people, I think, now use Facebook. The way it connects families and friends around the world, I think, has been an amazing thing for the planet. Yes, there are problems with Facebook. Yes, it probably got too big too quickly and they've got to work out how to solve the problems. But I would say that more than not, it's a force for good. You know, one of the things that I really can't stand, and I apologise in advance to anyone who I may know who has one of these. If I could think of one immediately, Sharon Osbourne is going to be shouting at me for saying this. But people that carry little dogs around in handbags, that's not what dogs should be carried in. And if you've got a dog that small, get a bigger one. Nothing against little dogs, they look a bit ridiculous. When you see them in the street poking out of handbags, it's embarrassing.